whether it's me or another medium, it's like you need to go through the grieving process yourself before you even speak to a medium. Like you shouldn't even speak to a medium until you come to a point in yourself where you're like, I'm ready to hear from them and not be distraught about hearing from them, whether it's good or bad. It does sometimes. I've seen it the opposite effect. So I always tell people, just you have to be ready and you have to grieve like a human grieves. You cannot rely on a medium. You just can't do it.
Hey, I'm Tanya Wilkinson, and this is Death on the Daily, bringing the conversation about death out of the shadows and into the mainstream. Because along with birth and change, if there's one thing that's going to happen to us all, then death is it. And we're going to explore how death actually shows up for us on the daily in a multitude of ways, and how when we allow ourselves to accept and to be with death, how it can teach us a whole heap about how to live this life well. What if the dead could speak to you? Would you listen? And you might be like me and nodding profusely. I've always felt a connection to the spirit world, so it's a big yes from me. But you might be sat here thinking, I'm scared of ghosts. No thanks. Or you might think, huh? That's impossible. When you die, you die. There is no such thing as spirits. And wherever you are, that's totally okay, because all are welcome in the Death on the Daily world. And my guest today might just give you something to think about. Jonathan Mark is a renowned celebrity psychic medium. Along with reading for A-list names, he also supports law enforcement, including the FBI, to solve cold cases. Plus, he helps the families of victims to find healing and closure. And you're going to want to tune into the end of this episode, because we not only explore his unique gifts, we also, for any true crime fans, yes, we go there, diving into his work on some massive cases. Plus, we bring this into each of our lives on the daily, including practical tips of how you can connect into signs from your beloved departeds, and why not to go searching for signs immediately after death when grief is all-consuming. Plus, Jonathan shares some crucial life lessons the dead need you to know now. So welcome, Jonathan, to Death on the Daily.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm so excited for this conversation, because this podcast is obviously called Death on the Daily. It's all about bringing conversations about death out of the shadows and into the mainstream. And you are someone who talks about death on the daily.
Yeah. Unfortunately.
For me, I'm absolutely fascinated. So you're a psychic medium. Could you explain, what is this and how did you realize that you had these incredible gifts?
Oh, well, for one, thank you. And two, a psychic medium, I think a psychic and medium are two different things. I always try to break it down so easy for people, for like my friends too. It's like a psychic is forward and medium is back, right?
Wow.
So it's like a medium is going to be talking about the past, people that passed away, and past tense, and the psychic is like I guess future. What I always tell people, and the truth is that the psychic stuff is like a little difficult, and because there's so much free will to happen in life, like I could tell you one day you have to stick to going to the right, like stay going to the right, and then that will, turn out to be whatever it is. And then all of a sudden there's a roadblock and you have to go left. It's like, well, then there's the free will. Like, the free will is there's a car crash, a roadblock. Now you have to go left. So it's so hard at times to pinpoint certain things. But I found out about this gift. I mean, it's going to sound, I guess, crazy, but when I was a kid, my aunt passed away when I was about 6 months old. Her name was Susan. Yeah, it was my mom's sister. They were like best friends. They lived together. Before she passed, she lived with my mom. They lived in the city together, everything. So when I was about 6 months old, she passed away. And as I got older, probably around like 3, 4, it was like Easter, and my grandfather was sitting on the couch. I hear the story all the time. That's the only reason why I know the details, because my mom and her other sister tell it to everyone. So I guess my grandfather, before he passed, was sitting on the couch, and it's their father. And I go, oh, Susie's here, and Susie's here. And my grandfather's like, okay. And just so you guys know, I'm Italian. So an Italian grandfather is like, huh? Like, he's like, what? So I'm like, yes, I'm like, Susie's here. And I guess I was getting like upset because like I was actually like really seeing her. Mm-hmm. And I said to him, like, so no fault to my parents. They put me in a gene like shirt and jean like pants. So I was wearing like the Canadian tuxedo, and I kept saying, I'm like, Susie's in this, Susie's in this, and I kept like pulling, and my grandma's like, what? My mom, from the other room in the kitchen, I guess heard all this and comes out and she's crying, like hysterically crying. And my grandfather's like, what's going on? So supposedly, after the funeral and the service, when they were going to go to the cemetery, my mom, walked in to where Susan was and put this jean jacket on that they used to steal from each other all the time because they lived together. And she didn't tell anyone. She didn't tell her other sister. She didn't tell anyone because she wanted it to be such an intimate thing between her and Susan and everything. So my grandfather's like, what the heck? Like, he's like, what? So like that kind of like initially started, and then it just kind of like unfolded from like, I would see things about my family that I shouldn't have seen at like a young age, I guess, like real life things I didn't really understand at the time. But I kind of like suppressed it only because I wanted to be what I perceived as normal, I guess. Like, and I was noticing like my friends, they weren't seeing things, they weren't, seeing, hearing all that I was. And I wanted to, like I said, be like relatively normal. I wanted to play sports, go out with my friends, like do everything. So it didn't really hit me in the face. I mean, it was going throughout the entirety of my life, but I didn't really like speak about it until I was like 18, 19 again to my mom. So there was like a gap period for a very long time.
Wow. And in that gap, I suppose you were just not speaking about it, but were you still connecting with the spirit realm in that time? Was it still coming to you, those gifts?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So I guess when I was a kid, my friends' parents and like my coaches that because I was a big lacrosse player, they would say that I would say things about their family that no one like knew as a kid, and they knew that it was pure and innocent because one, I was a kid, and two, they're like, how does he know? Like the things that I was saying was like stuff that kind of happened the day of the passing or like weeks, but like things like that where they're like, it was just them and I. So they're like, no one else was like really there. So I just kind of got like a little spooked by it, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
And I thought I was mentally ill for a while at like when I became like a teenager, and I realized that I'm like, this isn't normal.
Yeah.
Like, so I thought I had schizophrenia.
Wow.
Like I was like pretty certain about that.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, it was tough.
As a teenager to hold. And how did that journey unfold then for you to, I suppose, accept and embrace your gifts and start to speak about them, and I guess it's really understanding as well what they are.
Yeah, so like to my knowledge, nobody in my family has this except like other mediums may have mentioned that like other people in my family had this. It's just they didn't know. But I was going off to college. I had preseason for lacrosse, and coincidentally, I committed to a school to play, and I decommitted to go to the same school Susan went to and my dad, because they both went to the same school. And before I drove up there with my parents, I turned to my mom and I go, is there mental illness in the family? And like that's how I started off the conversation, because I was going off the next day, and it was getting, when I say worse, I mean things were coming in clear and more specific. So like to me, I was like, is this sickness getting worse? Like I don't know what's going on. And she's like, no. And I explained to her, and she goes, well, I'm going to see a medium. She's like, I can ask if you have this or if you're crazy. She's like, I don't really know. So back then, I thought a medium was like the big hair, the nails, crystal ball. I'm like, what the heck is this person going to like tell me? Like you know what I mean? So I came back for winter session, and the medium was like, bring him in. And I go in, and the medium was like, yeah, this kid really has a big gift. Like, do you want to learn how to do this? My first reaction was like, no way, screw that. I want to go back to school, play lacrosse, have fun. But then we leave and we turn the corner, and I go, oh shit. I'm like, I should have done this. Like, I really should have learned. So the medium trained me, and I got to the point where I could do this on my own. And then it just became like word of mouth. I didn't want people to even know I was a medium. I didn't want my friends to know. I didn't want anyone to know. So that's why my name is Jonathan Mark. Like, I didn't have social media. You can only get to me from word of mouth. And then it just kind of blossomed and grew.
Wow. And it's fascinating as well. I didn't even think that there's that apprenticeship
Yeah.
to understand your gift.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause it's kind of like learning another language, right? Like they're really helping you like interpret what you're seeing, because like how I see things or how it originally started, I use it as like a Pictionary. Like they would put symbols and stuff on the wall, and I would have to decipher really what that means to make it like a message for someone or like a thought to someone. And then as you do it, like practice makes perfect with like everything, it becomes more fluent and faster and more specific. So then I get like names instantly. I get all this stuff like really fast, because now what they do is they'll take situations from my life and start flashing it in my head. So for example, if I saw Jonathan, right? Like I saw myself, I know the person who's coming through, their name's either John or Jonathan, right? Like that's kind of how they like do it for me now. And then they'll put like movie clips in my head to like be like, if someone got hit by a car, someone, you know, things like that. So they really try to decipher it now, kind of like flashes, like screenshots in my head now. It just happens so fast.
Wow. Yeah. I'm just wrapping my brain around that. I'm like, could my mind think?
Yeah.
I suppose that's a skill, isn't it? Being able to, you mentioned it's like that game of Pictionary, being able to take that and decode it. I'm just like scrambling my brains here, because I live very in that real logical world.
Yeah. And if you need a partner for Pictionary, I'm your guy.
Yeah.
I had to practice with it for years. I'm your guy. So like you would crush it. Yeah. You would crush it. Yeah.
Oh my goodness, that is the added benefit of your gifts. Oh my goodness. And I'm really interested as well. So we're talking about my hubby before, because you're both into sneakers, but my hubby is also an absolute skeptic. But he's really interested in, he was really interested in us having this conversation, because he's interested in, I suppose, the how you can, as a skeptic, connect into it. Sort of what does I suppose, what's the pushback that you typically get, and how do you answer that?
I just tell people to sit down with me for 10 to 15 minutes. That's it. Like I don't really have to like tell people the stuff I've done or whatever. I just say, sit down with me and let me change your mind. Like, don't come in with a preconceived notion, because, you know, like I could just, and like most people in any profession, they could really just like read off their accolades to people and stuff. And it's like, I'd rather not do that. I'd rather you just sit down and just experience it. Like, and then make your decision after that. Like, cause I have to do it all the time. I mean, like, it's like people also perceive too that mediums only read like women, like women's their clientele, but it's like, that's not the case for me. I'm 50-50. I have 50% men, 50% women. The men are like special forces, military, like all these types of people that you would think are like the most skeptical people, CIA, FBI, Secret Service, all these people. And they come to me all the time, like all of the time. And, you know, it's obviously you have to prove yourself, just like in any field, like whether you're a medium or whether you're a doctor. It's like people are going to want to see what you do before they want to come. But I just say to those people, so just come and sit down for 10 minutes. That's it. 10, 15 minutes, whatever.
I love that, coming with that open mind to just receive, because I could imagine there might be some people come in wanting to trip you up. But actually, from my experience of having readings, it is amazing where you're just, I was had a reading by someone, and literally it was just straight into conversation and bang. It was actually Jordan's grandmother came.
Yes, like, that's what I'm telling you. The funniest stuff is like when someone comes to me and their spouse, whether it's a woman or a man, their family comes through because they were like, dude, like, hello, or like, ma'am, hello, like, I'm here and this is the specific stuff that no one knows. Like, and then they come to me because they're like, how the hell did you know that? And then that doesn't mean that they're a believer. That just means like they're like interested. They're like, wow, you piqued my curiosity about something. And that's all you really need, is to pique someone's curiosity enough. But like my thing too is bad for business, I know, but I'm not about it for that. But you come to me when you're ready. Like, don't come because someone's forcing you to come. Like, you only come when like you're ready to come. And you know, people are obsessed with mediums and or just like obsessed with that. And I tell people, you can only come back to me once a year, because I'm like, I don't want you to constantly rely on me for things. Like, that's not how it works in the world. I'm like, you need to like learn to navigate life yourself, just like I do too. But I'm like, you shouldn't rely on me. So people are like, that's so bad for business. And I'm like, yeah, but it's like, you don't have to be an asshole kind of and take people's money just to tell them the same thing. It doesn't make sense. Like, let things in life happen.
I love that. And I love the ethics of that, because for me, what's coming through as you shared that is that we can all go on our journey, obviously not to have gifts like you. I feel like that's something that's gifted, but there's a connection to our intuition. And there's that, for example, for me, when I think of our daughter who we lost and my granddad, the two closest people to me who've gone. Oh, thank you. And which was the inspiration, actually, where everything there's a spark that comes from it. So my daughter, her legacy is this podcast that we're speaking on right now. Awesome. But when I think about them and I think about those little messages that I get from them, and it takes me to on your podcast, Connect, you had a conversation with Jenna Dewan about the ladybugs and the little ladybugs that she was noticing. And I always do. It's always for me in a butterfly or a plant or something. So I'd love to hear your thoughts as well around, I suppose, between readings, how can we just create our own, I suppose it's more in the more basic intuitive connection, but what does that look like? Because for me, I observe how I switched that off and I had to turn it back on through really practicing it. So what does that look like?
I feel like everyone has this gift, right? Like everyone can sing, but not everyone can sing like Frank Sinatra, I always say. And you know, we all have this. And when it comes to the signs like Jenna or whoever, it's the sign. So like for me, my signs are always numbers, because numbers to me, you can't really make up, right? So like, for example, my Aunt Sue died July 10th. So I have tattooed all over me 710, and like, that's my thing. And when I'm driving and a car cuts me off and the license plate is 710, I wake up in the morning, it's without my alarm, it's 710. I pay for something, it's 710. Like, those are the signs that I take, because I'm like, those are the ones you cannot make up. And it's always the birthday. I always tell people, if you want to do the like number sign, it's stay away from death date, because that's too sad. But to open yourself up and, you know, to like receive signs and stuff, my whole thing, it's going to sound so stupid, but it's the truth of it, is when you meditate or just talk to them or pray, whatever you want to do, all you do is ask them, because like their whole purpose of communicating just in general is for you, right? So there's people that have come up to me, they're like, I'm scared. I don't want them to come up to me. I'm like, their whole purpose is not to scare you. So just ask them to stop, and they'll stop. And then they're like, yeah, like I just said in my head, please stop. And they stopped. I'm like, yeah, because like their whole purpose is to like make you feel comforted that they're okay, and that they want to continuously show you that they're around, maybe not physically, but like around you. So my thing is, it's just meditating and just asking for any sign that you want. So whether it's a ladybug, a butterfly, whether it's numbers, I always try to go for the specific numbers, just because then it feels differently when you see it, right? Like when you're driving, like I always use that, and some idiot cuts you off, and then you want to like reach through the windshield and rip their throat, because you're like, you almost made me crash my car. And then the license plate is 710. You're like, okay, like my aunt is telling me to slow down. And most of the time too, and I'm sorry for rambling, but most of the time the signs will come when you need them. They're not going to come like just because you miss them. They know that you miss them. That's without question. They will come, good, bad, or indifferent, like when there's something going on in your life, because they want you to know like they're along this ride with you. Maybe again, they're not here physically, but that's what I've noticed. Anytime something good, bad, or whatever happens, I get an influx from my aunt. like an influx, and then it simmers down, and then all of a sudden when something happens, it influxes again. It's interesting.
Wow. I think that's so comforting as well, because when I've supported people in grief immediately in the aftermath of someone dying, there is always that I'm looking for the signs. I was actually speaking to someone recently and she said, I'm out there, I'm looking for the signs, I can't see them. And there was that sadness because obviously that want to connect. And I think that's fascinating, that actually the guidance is just wait. And they know that you're missing them and there's always that connection, but actually they'll be there in those moments where it's really important for them to be so.
100%. And I also think too, if they come through so fast after, it could be good or bad, right? Like it really could be like great, like it comforts them, but then the bad side is that they realize that they're not here and they miss them so much. So then like the process that they have of grieving and taking steps forward actually goes back. And that's why I tell the people with readings too, because as much as people are looking for signs right after, they want to communicate with them right after too. And whether it's me or another medium, it's like you need to go through the grieving process yourself before you even speak to a medium. Like you shouldn't even speak to a medium until you come to a point in yourself where you're like, I'm ready to hear from them and not be distraught about hearing from them, whether it's good or bad. It does. Sometimes I've seen it the opposite effect. So I always tell people, just you have to be ready and you have to grieve like a human grieves. You cannot rely on a medium. You just can't do it.
Do you know what? It's so interesting that you share that, because actually in my journey, I went in too quickly. So we lost our daughter 5 months into pregnancy. And I think it was literally in that first month that I then contacted the medium, who I'd worked with before, went in. And I remember afterwards, I said to a friend, I was like, that was just not helpful at all. It was because I went in again. I went in almost with a wish list of I need to connect into her. I need to XYZ. This will help me heal, and none of that came through because it wasn't what I needed in that moment. And so I think that's really, really good guidance of actually when you're in the throes of grief, just hold, integrate on that journey, and then on the other side there will be a moment when it's right.
100%. Like. And I know, again, like I always make this joke, but it's true. It's like bad for business, but like I'm not here to do that to people. Like I'm here to like truly just try and help people get through the toughest times of their lives, and the right way, just the right way. Like you don't have to rely on myself or another medium. You can easily just grieve the way you want to, but if you want to go to a medium, just make sure mentally you're there before.
Yeah, I think that's such wise advice. And on the topic of healing as well, I want to speak about the work that you do with law enforcement. You mentioned, I had no idea, you mentioned in our chat before that you used to be a police officer, and you now work with law enforcement on really high profile cases, including, I think you worked on the Gabby Petito case, as well as then creating a really beautiful connection with Gabby's mum. Tell us more around, well, I suppose there's two sides of it. Let's start with your work with law enforcement on cases, what that looks like. And then I'd love for us to go into then how you work directly with families as well.
Sure. So working with law enforcement originally, so the story kind of is I went through the process, the academy, all that stuff, and 2 high-level officers knew about my gift. And they basically were like, they pulled me aside. And like right before you finish, you have to do this thing called FTO, which is field training. And you go to like a precinct and, you kind of shadow someone, essentially. Like you work alongside with them for like a probationary period. And they pulled me aside before like really the process kind of started, whatever. And they're like, you really need to think about this. Just go home to your family and be safe. And we'll call on you when we see it's fit to use you for cases, right? Like, so I didn't really know what that meant, but my mom and my family encouraged me to go down this route after a certain amount of time. So I left and I started doing readings, but it was only word of mouth. And what I didn't know was they were sending me people through like NYPD, through all these people where they were giving fake names because they wanted to see how my gift was developing. And it was going on for like a little bit. So there was a really big case, and I'm not sure if I can even say the case yet, but there was a big case that happened,
Mm.
and it was a woman that was jogging. She was murdered, and they sent someone to me that I didn't know. And it turned out to be this woman's cousin, because they were like, we need to figure out like if this person, the person of interest, is actually that guy, or if there's something else, like we don't know. So it turned out that like I did it. I helped them like change their person of interest to the actual person who did it. So like they thought it was someone and whatever. So then when I helped them with that, I think it started to travel around the department being like, this kid just helped us with this. Let's see what else he can do. So then they kept sending me people. And then like eventually it actually went to the bureau, like the FBI. Like it just kind of like, I guess the community's kind of like, they speak on cases and stuff. And so then coincidentally enough, they sent one of the agent's wives to me to see how I was. She goes back, she had a good experience, thankfully, and she was like, what do you have to lose? Like, she's like, you're kind of at like a dead end on this serial killer case. Like what do you have to lose at this point? So he brought me on to a whistleblower case to see if I could even do that, right? Like they're always testing. Like it's never just like a straight line. There's so many curves and bumps. And I found all this out later because now I have very close relationships with them. But so he calls me and he's like, we have this whistleblower for this big company. They're like, who do you see? So I give the initials, and I'm only saying the initials because it was a foreign name that I didn't know. So I give the initials, and he says to me, he goes, we already looked at his computer. Like there's no way. And I said, well, I'm like, that's what I'm seeing. So you could take it or leave it, like kind of like that. So I guess what he did was he took it, went, and they went in and they found all the like letters, the anonymous, the emails, like everything on a file within a file.
Wow.
And so then I didn't hear from him for like months, even though he told me I helped him with this. I didn't hear from him for months. Okay. Like this is where my mind starts to go in 1,000 different directions. I'm like, what the hell went wrong? I'm at dinner with my family. No joke. I'm at dinner with my family. I get a phone call from a random blocked number, and I don't really answer them. I don't know if you do, but like I never answered like private or blocked numbers. And he called again. So I answer. He goes, hey, it's special agent, blah, blah, blah. He goes, we have this case, a Long Island serial killer case. He's like, what do you see? Now, this is back in 2017, 2018. And I start telling him stuff, and all I get is, okay, cool. Hangs up the phone, right? So again, I'm like, what the fuck is going on? Like, I'm like, turns out that the person that I was talking about is now arrested and like everything, but there's like many steps that happen in between, but like they're always testing you. So like now I get called on to all these like high profile cases and stuff, and I don't even really get to speak about them until years later. Like with the Gabby Petito one, it was the same thing. I didn't really get to speak about it until years later.
Wow. Oh my goodness. And to me, that gives me the ammunition to go to my hubby and be like, this is it's based upon tests, because I suppose that I think that puts a lot of rigor behind it, is that that proof point that actually, yes, this is leading to evidence that then leads to. That's incredible. And with Gabby Petito as well. So am I right in thinking you worked on the case and then afterwards you've created a beautiful relationship with Gabby's mom? And what I can feel is how, because she's been on your podcast, I think a couple of times. I listened to the latest episode as well.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I can feel just how healing it is as well in your work directly with the family. So I'd love to hear a little bit around that.
Yeah. So with Gabby's case, when I got pulled on, they wouldn't let us communicate until it was done. So like we didn't get to communicate. And the weird thing like about that timing was, I met with Nicole, Gabby's mom, so I got a call and they're like, you're now allowed to speak to her. She wants to talk to you like without it being recorded, essentially. She's like, okay, here you go. So like, that's how it like initially started. Then 3 days later, I get a text message from the special agent in charge for the Gilligo case, or the Long Island serial killer case, being like, great day for our task force. We made the arrest. Like that's like within like 3 to 4 days of each other, like they both happened, and they're both different departments. So it's like kind of weird that happened. But when you meet with the family after you work on a case or even during a case, I try to tell like the law enforcement, whoever I'm working with, the detective or the bureau, whoever, I'm like, I need to go into these cases trying to give closure first, then answer second, because I'm like, you don't understand, like you're dealing with these people and their families, and they have like the worst situation. They don't have any answers to anything. And I'm like, I want them to feel like their loved one is there, like truly, by giving them like a normal reading. And then I'll go into like, okay, this is what I see on the case. Can you blah, 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 blah. So like, that's kind of how I navigate it. And now they know that, like, that's how I work. So it's like, now they understand. Granted, do I get enough time? No, because like, they don't have enough time, right? Like they're like, you have this amount of time, like do it, like, so, but I think it's a good feeling because like, I try my best. I know it's bad, I guess, but I try my best not to develop a connection with the family until after, because then my readings become so biased, because then they become like, I get so angry about what happened, and then it clouds my judgment when I do a reading, because then it kind of tailors to me speaking bad about the person, whether I should be answering questions about the situation as a whole. So it's tough because like you want to develop that connection instantly with them. Like that's just like a fact. But I'm starting to learn that like, until the case is like kind of in a forward progression in a good way, I can't do it. But I do, which is bad, because it's like they like reach out. They're like, he said this, I need to talk to him. And then we talk, and it's like, we have now that connection, but I try my best not to until it's done.
Yeah. Yeah. I think what's really, because obviously there's the job of the law enforcement and the courts, but actually I think that human connection, and that's what I loved in the episodes that you did. It's Nicole, isn't it? Gabby's mom.
Yeah, it's Nicole.
Yeah. And I love those episodes because you can feel that. And I think actually that really must be quite cathartic when you're the other person and knowing that actually there's someone who's on your side. In that case, it was with Brian
Laundrie.
Yeah, Brian Laundrie wanting to come through and stuff. And I love that sort of you being there to protect and to support her family first and foremost.
Yeah, it was tough because like, Nicole wants to hear from him like badly, like, cause like, I think people seem to forget this, and I did as well too. So I'm part of those people, but Gabby dated him for like years before. So like Nicole has that personal connection with him prior to this incident that happened. So like Nicole's like, I just need to talk to, like, I want to hear from him, like what he has to say. And she's like, it's my way of getting closure, because she's like, again, people forget, like Gabby dated him for 3 years before or 2 years before. So she's like, I knew him and the family for years. And she's like, so I want to hear from him, not from the parents. But, it's tough because it's like, I don't want to bring him in, but that's what she wants. So I'm trying to gear myself up to do it, but it's tough.
I can imagine that's really, really tough. And I think what really resonated with me there as well is just how powerful it is that you can, obviously there's a journey to get to that point, but you're opening up the channels for Nicole to be able to get the closure with her determining what that is. And I think that's so powerful in everything, just how you create that container for healing through really understanding actually what are the needs here and how can I best support, which is so beautiful.
Thank you.
I love that. And I suppose what else I'm really interested in, because I don't even know, should I call it the spirit world? Is it a different world, or is it more layer?
I don't even know what it is, but we could definitely call it that. Yeah.
Spirit world. So if we think, because in Death in the Daily, I love to root us into the lessons that being with death can teach us about how to live life. In my journey, me being with death, being present with death has just opened up so many different avenues, obviously this podcast, but also just in general of how I move through life, what I prioritize, my purpose, etc. In your connections with the spirit world, what is there any, I suppose, messages that you've received more, this is quite broad, more broadly for all of us as humanity, in how we can really live this life well? What's most important for us while we're still alive? What are the messages that come through?
It's interesting because not one reading is the same, right? Like not one reading is even virtually the same, other than like maybe someone, they share that they lost a parent, right? But I guess the stuff that I've been noticing when I do readings, depending on what it is I always use this phrase, is the hindsight is 2020. I always say. So like they now see everything for truly what it is. So like, you know, the overarching thing that I see to live and to go, you know, happily, or whatever you want to call it, because I think it's just it seems just like acknowledging your wrongs is like a huge thing, right? Like no one's perfect. Like people make mistakes, and that's part of life. But if you continue to, because like the thing that people don't understand too is when you go to the other side, yes, hindsight's 2020, but your personality is still the same. So like how you are here is how you are there. And like that's how you know if someone's real or fake in a reading too. Like if someone says to you that your grandma is super quiet and you're like, what? Like she was the loudest person in the room. Like, what are you talking about? Then it always makes people scratch their head being like, that doesn't make sense, right? At least that's what I get picked and, you know, whatever. So like everything I do has to be like right on for people, but I always tell people it's, you know, just acknowledging your wrongs. That's like the biggest thing. And, you know, just, you know, kind of being content with where you are. Like, I think that's also something big too. We always want to do better, and that's great. But if you're hurting people along the way doing it and you're not righting your wrongs, like that's an issue.
Oh, that feels like one for our times, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Definitely feels like one that we need to spread that message far and wide. But I think that's really powerful as well, to that point of rooting into this simplicity and rooting into what we have now, and being able to really connect in and say, actually, we're all perfectly imperfect humans.
Exactly.
When we do wrong, let's acknowledge it, let's face into it. Because I could imagine as well that probably leaves less of a less of the conversations by way of where you need to seek forgiveness once you've departed this world. I can imagine there's a lot of spirits out there who are like, actually, I need to make sure that this person knows that I'm really sorry for this or whatever. So I can imagine it helps you to exit just
100%. And sometimes people aren't even ready to hear it. Like I've had times where, you know, I'm doing a reading and a family member, again, whether it's a parent, brother, sister, aunt, uncle, whoever, do something pretty crappy, like really, really bad, that really alters like who they are as a person, right? For the rest of their life. And they come through specifically and say the specific things that happened, how it affected them. And the person who I'm like speaking to, like who I'm reading as like my client, will deny it. They'll be like, no. And then all of a sudden, weeks will go by or a month, they'll send an email being like, you know, you were right. Wow. Because they sometimes just don't want to believe it or hear it. Yeah. So their first instinct is to say no. They're like, absolutely not, no. And I try to give like leeway to those people, because sometimes it's frustrating on my end, because it's like, am I seeing this? Am I wrong? You're telling me I'm wrong, but then a month later, you're like, I just didn't want to say it. It's like, well, people don't know this, but I'm like a perfectionist with this stuff. This is the only thing I'm like a perfectionist with. So then I sit and I'm like, God damn, I'm like, am I screwing up? I'm like, I don't even know. Like, I thought I saw that. Like, that's weird. And that was an intense message. I didn't. And then they say that, and I'm like, yes, it's validating, but it's also frustrating. So it's like a weird thing. I try to give people like leeway, but it's like, it's weird.
Or I can imagine as well, if it triggers something in you. I think this is not connecting with the spirit world in that way, but I was working with a spiritual teacher who a year before I quit F1, handed my notice in, and she said, have you ever thought about handing your notice in? That's what's coming through really strongly for me. And I got so angry with her.
Yeah.
So triggered, because it just pushed a button. And 2 years after I left F1, I was messaging her. I was like, by the way, you did that. You were spot on, because 1 year later I was handing my notice in because I knew it was right. But I think it is that thing that sometimes we just need to, I suppose, sit with it and be with it. It took a year, but eventually coming around. I can imagine for you, as the person who's received that message, it can probably be quite like, oh my God. Did I
am I wrong?
Yeah.
Am I wrong? Am I not seeing this correctly? Like, because then it makes you second guess yourself, which is like problematic in a reading. Like, I always tell people that are trying to be a medium or that are developing their gift, is like the moment you second guess yourself is, that's not good. Like, you need to always be confident with what you say and like what you see, because what you're seeing is what you're seeing. Maybe you're interpreting it wrong, but you are seeing it. So say what you see, I always tell people, because it's like, you may interpret it wrong, but the person who you're speaking to understands what you're saying.
Wow.
They're like, oh, you're trying to say this. Like, but I don't know. I'm still learning. So it's like, I don't even know.
It's a devil of humans, aren't we, at the end of the day as well?
Yeah. I'm like, I don't know. Like,
not a robot doing this.
I just,
it's gonna
just trying. Yeah,
exactly that. Well, Jonathan, I am conscious we are nearly.
No, it is all good. Whenever you want.
Well, I have one more question for you.
Sure.
I ask this at the end of each end of each episode. And this is what I call note to self. So if you could write a note to a past version of yourself, and I'm thinking maybe you at some point in your childhood or in your teenage years.
Yeah.
You could write that note from where you're sitting today. What words of wisdom, advice, comfort, support would you share with yourself?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think if I could write something back to myself, I would probably say, believe in yourself and don't be ashamed of what you have, because look what you're doing, and kind of like look like, I don't know. I think those would be the two biggest things, because now looking back and me trying to push it away and me trying, to be normal or what we perceive as normal. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, like, who gives a shit, right? Like, like, I used to care so much about my friends and didn't want them to know I was a medium. And, I wish I just embraced it more when I was younger and stopped trying to push it, because I could have helped earlier on. Like, I could have helped people earlier on. And, I think everything happens for a reason, but that's what I would say, is just kind of sit back and, like I always say, like, maybe it's not where I want to be now, but look where I'm at, right? It's like I'm helping law enforcement, like I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And it's like, when I was a kid, with this gift, if I just believed in more, I could have helped out earlier on with these cases to help out more families, to help out more people. And, I just wish I believed in myself a little bit more and didn't try to like be what society deems as normal, because like people are way more into this stuff than not. And I did not know that. So.
Oh, that's so powerful. And I think it resonates for, I'm thinking about the Nickelodeon and McDonald's food court that I was hanging out in, versus doing anything that had meaning to me or connecting into my roots or whatever it might be. But I also think there's something really interesting. And now, even from our conversation about that ripple effect of being able to encourage anyone who has got this gift or any other gift that defies that what is deemed normal, in sort of inverted commas, to be able to say what I could really feel from that. I think that's such a powerful message for anyone at any time of life. Just believe in yourself, believe in your gifts. If you feel them, they're there. Follow that pathway. And that is the ripple effect that you're creating through everything that you're doing.
100%. I just hope people, whether it's a medium or whatever, kind of what you just said is like, believe in yourself, because no one else is going to believe in what you do as much as you do. And, yes, it's nice to have a support system, but, at the end of the day, you have to do what makes you happy, and you have to do what you believe is the right thing to do. And I hope people just listen to this and they, today, tomorrow, the next day, just do what makes them happy.
Oh, I love that. Do what makes you happy. Follow that flow. Amazing. Well, Jonathan, if anyone wants more of you in their world, how can they connect with you? Tell us about your podcast and anything else that you wish to.
Oh, thank you. I have a podcast. It's called Connect with Jonathan Mark. We started out reading celebrities, and I shifted very quickly to doing what I was passionate about. and that's helping law enforcement and families with real unsolved cases, real families. And, it's been a life-changing thing for me mentally, just to help them and just in general. And if you have a case that you need help in, you can always reach out. But if you want a reading, you go to my Instagram at Jonathan Mark Medium or my website, jonathanmark.net. So thank you so much.
Jonathan, it has been such a joy.
Thank
I am
you.
absolutely fascinated. I definitely say tune into Jonathan's podcast, especially also if you like the true crime space, because I've sent a few people your way who are really big in that. Your podcast is basically my immersion into the that's the only space where I'll really go there. But it's absolutely fascinating and also really, really interesting as well, where you bring listeners on as well to do readings in it too.
Thank you so much.
So Jonathan, thank you so much for joining me today on Death on the Daily.
Thank you.
All of my gratitude to you for joining me for another Dead Conversation. Death on the Daily is edited by David Strutt. The music is Set Free by Katie Gray. And I am Tanya Wilkinson. And if you enjoyed this episode, I would be over the moon if you can rate, review, and subscribe. It really, really helps me to get the word out there. And if you want to say hi or to hear more about my work as a coach and death doula, including how I support my clients to navigate their death on the daily, then all of the ways that you can connect with me are in the show notes. I'll be back soon with some more Dead Conversations. And in the meantime, take good care of yourself and others.
There's a cold fire, there's a crossfire, and there's something inside. And we'll never make it, and we'll never break.